Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is the last big workshop for the year from us here at the Bindplane team, and it is a big one. We've been super hyped about this for the last couple of months, and we finally got the time, and we got resources by getting Craig and Nick on to walk us through everything. So I'm super happy to have everybody here. We're at around 33 attendees. Let's do some more filler content with me, just saying intros, so we can hopefully get a few more people jumping in. It is quite late if you're out in Europe like I am, but hopefully for everybody staying after work, they're gonna have a engaging session for the next hour. And for y'all out in North America or in the Western Hemisphere, perfect timing and welcome. Good morning, actually, I should be saying for everybody out there. Cool. I'm sure we're good to go. Let's jump right in, and we can get more attendees coming in as we go. Yeah. Again, once again, hey everyone, super happy to see you with us today. Um, both the whole team and myself were super thrilled to get more than 40 attendees joining us for this one, and we've prepared an awesome demo. I'm super happy to have Craig and Nick with me because they are actually really embedded into what we're doing with our customers here at Bindplane, and this is a really important session that we want to help you explain, or basically explain and help you to figure out how to do your Bindplane migrations from the SecOps, the legacy forwarder. So Craig is our alliances guru, so he's done more training sessions in the last year than I've done workshops in my entire career. Didn't mean that to rhyme, but it ended up rhyming. So he's one of the hot shots here at Bindplane. And then Nick is our newest sales engineer superstar. And yeah, let me shut up for a second and get the mic over to you guys to do some introductions. And yeah, Craig, you can go ahead first.
So, morning, everybody, or afternoon, wherever you're dialing in from. Yeah, as Adnan alluded to, my name is Craig Lee. I'm the principal partner engineer over here at Bindplane, and really been focused for the last year or two on our Google relationship and what we've been doing with SecOps. So we'll be diving into this a lot further on the call today, but really excited. What you're able to see is a culmination of efforts where we're going to make things a lot more powerful and easier for you to get that telemetry flowing into the Google solution.
And hi, I'm Nick. Apologies for the voice. Cold beat me up today. I'm one of the new sales engineers. I'll be in the chat answering all your questions that you might have. And yeah, really nice to talk with you today. And yeah, I'll turn it back over to Adnan and Craig.
Sweet. Yeah. We could jump right in. We Before we get into the nitty-gritty parts, there's just a few really short introductory points that we can run through, and of course the agenda to explain what we're going to be doing for the next 55 minutes, more or less. So we're going to go into four main things. So first we'll talk about the legacy forwarder deprecation. So that was announced 3 months ago. So we're going to go through all of that, what it means for you as a user or an end user of Google SecOps. We'll also talk about Bindplane. We'll introduce why Google SecOps decided to use us as the main ingestion pipeline. We'll talk about a bit about the architecture, how it all works, how it connects. But we'll also talk about the concept of telemetry pipelines as a whole, and specifically the op-amp protocol, what that is, what that means. When we'll also have a very elaborate demo where Craig's going to walk you through how all of that works from a hands-on perspective as well. Of course, you can always wait for the Q&A at the end to ask questions, but specifically for us, we prefer you just throwing questions in the chat here, and we'll just we can always stop the session in a demo and then answer those questions right away because I feel as if that's more interactive and it's more of those are questions that you have that we can easily incorporate and answer right away, and then have a good discussion about that since those are your end user problems that we ultimately want to solve, right? Um, and yeah, so without further ado, let's jump right into the legacy forwarder deprecation. Specifically, why and how and what. So the Google Cloud Security Operations team About 3 months ago, they published an update where they announced deprecating the forwarder specifically. Well, it will absolutely finitely be deprecated by January of 27. So there's roughly a year left, a bit more. Um, but that doesn't mean you should be waiting. As of 3 months ago, Bindplane is officially the official data ingestion, telemetry ingestion method with using the OpenTelemetry collector. So the short answer to all of this is to the why question is it's because Bindplane we standardize on OTel. So we standardize on OpenTelemetry. You get much better security and scalability, and it's infinitely easier to manage and transform all of your log data. We're going to go into more details, of course, with the demos, but this is for right now what you need to remember. And then specifically about Bindplane, what it is. Um, it's an OpenTelemetry native telemetry pipeline. So you can collect, process, export telemetry from any source to any destination, but you also get enterprise scale collector management. So Bindplane is a control plane where you can run and manage thousands, hundred thousands, even up to 1 million collectors. Super easy. You also obviously get high availability. And we've seen a lot of our customers get up to 50% of cost reduction just because they're using what we provide with Bindplane using visual routing. You get super easy way to visually create configurations, routing with those configurations, and then of course data transformations with using the processors. And that's, I think, one of the biggest things that we're also going to be demoing today, but that's one of the biggest things you can remember for the beginning. Of course, if you're currently a customer of SecOps or Google Cloud Observability, you get immediate access to Bindplane Google Edition. If you're a SecOps Enterprise Plus customer, you immediately for free get access to Bindplane Enterprise Google Edition. Now, what this means is that you are tied into using Google only destinations, so you can send your data anywhere outside of Google. But apart from that, you get the standard Bindplane experience. However, Bindplane Google Edition, you're limited to very standard, basic telemetry processing. With the Enterprise Edition, you get everything. You get advanced data processing with masking PII, you get dedupes, you get filtering, you get aggregations, compressions. So those are things for you to know right away as Google SecOps customers. But if you want to expand and not and use more destinations than just Google specific destinations, then in that case you can use either Bindplane Growth. The only caveat with Bindplane Growth is that it's cloud only. So if you want to use self-hosted, then you're going to have to use Bindplane Enterprise, where at the end it's essentially the same Bindplane experience, but you get all of these direct, like more beneficial and enterprise things like direct customer success you can send to any destination. And of course, you get all of these advanced data reductions and processing with both of these options. Cool. Just a quick Bindplane architecture overview and a diagram, and then we can jump into some more interesting demo-y things, I'm going to call them. Just a question. If we see, okay, that's some questions we can answer once we take a quick break. But yeah, for the architecture first, specifically for Bindplane, um, we only manage and configure OTel collectors via OpAmp. So we're the control plane. We're not required for telemetry flow. We just make it straightforward, easier, and you get a very detailed insight into what's happening. You still use either the Bindplane distribution of OpenTelemetry Collector, or you use any custom collector that you build yourself, as long as it has OpAmp built into it, or using the supervisor, you can communicate with Bindplane natively like that through OpAmp. Of course, you can run OTel collectors either as agent modes, in agent mode as agents, or as gateways. Bindplane helps you set all of that up as well, so it's very simple to do that as well via Bindplane. As I said, it's either cloud or self-hosted, up to you to pick. And of course, it's under 100% vendor agnostic. Again, as I'm saying, we're just a control plane. So we're not locking you into whatever destination you're using, whatever SIEM, observability vendor, etc. So we're just a control plane. So from an architecture point of view, what that would look like is that the middle part here is your network. That's where you have all of your collectors. The left side is where Bindplane is as the control plane. And then this dotted line, or well, the dashed line in the middle is the op-amp protocol that connects all of it. So the middle part is where you run your collectors. And this, again, as I said, can either be a BDOC collector or any collector that you build yourself. The op-amp protocol connects to Bindplane from the inside out. So you only have to open up a firewall from the inside, and then it establishes a WebSocket connection, and that's how it communicates. It's, of course, TLS if you're using Bindplane Cloud 443, or if you're running self-hosted Bindplane, it's at 3001. So from that point of view, it's built to be secure just because you don't have to open up firewall ports from the outside in. It's always the collector that opens the op-amp connection with Bindplane. So the telemetry still flows through your pipeline. Bindplane is the control plane. So yeah, that's the cool part. Cool part here. So moving on. Here are the top 5 migration benefits with Bindplane that you can remember. Of course, Craig and Nick, we're going to go into details here in the demo, but these are the 5 main things that we've seen be crucial. So one thing with the legacy forwarder was that you needed multiple agents across Windows, Linux. There's no agent for Mac, but you also, for some use cases, needed Docker for Windows. For Bindplane, it's just one unified OpenTelemetry collector. You don't have to really think about different things. It's one identical thing for all of these platforms. For data filtering, it's quite basic in the forwarder. Bindplane, because we're using OpenTelemetry Collector, everything you get in the collector, you have at your disposal here. So all of the advanced filterings, dedupes, masking, it's all there. For databases, of course, you needed an extra step for the forwarder. With Bindplane, it's built into the collectors. Every source you have available, or specifically receiver in the collector, you have available here as well. PCAP, very complex to set up. With Bindplane, again, because it's in the collector, works seamlessly. Splunk as well. So that's also one thing we've seen with a lot of our customers that they're specifically asking for. And now for the demos. Um, it's a one massive demo that we've kind of cut into four parts for you to basically get the use cases down for all of the things that we've seen our customers use, and hopefully it's going to help you get onboarded as quick as possible and get your migrations going. So I'm reckoning. I think we can jump over to you, Craig, if you want to or actually take over the screen shares, maybe.
Sure. Yep, I can do that. And though while we're doing it too, we have a couple questions from the questions and answer section. I think we'd take a little bit of a pause here. Great time to answer some of these. So first one, there's a question from Vamsi. So thanks for submitting it. If I'm in SecOps basic version and want Bindplane Enterprise, is there an option? Is there an option to buy directly from us, or how does that work? So yes, short answer is yes. We have 2 different options for you. One with Bindplane Growth, and that is SaaS only today. There are some limitations on the maximum number of agents, but that is easy for you to sign up. That is self-enabled with Bindplane Growth. You just swipe a credit card, and everything is set up with billing there. So that's kind of our more of our mid-market type of option. We also have Bindplane Enterprise, which you can purchase through us directly, and we'd be happy to reach out after this call and talk to you about pricing and sizing and things of that nature. I'll also mention too, from a transaction perspective, it is possible to buy Bindplane Enterprise Edition as a private offer on the Google Cloud Marketplace. So oftentimes that'll be great, especially when you're looking at any kind of commits with Google. We can integrate with that sales model because we are on the marketplace there. So happy to talk to you about both of those options, and this is a pretty common question for us. So definitely can help you with that one. And then I see, yeah, your third question there is if you had a self-hosted need for that Bindplane Enterprise. So then the only option there would be Bindplane Enterprise Edition, which again we could work with you on. And I'll also mention this too. When Ed now was showing the architecture, that was labeled for Bindplane Cloud, right? We see things from the collectors. They were reaching out over external network to Bindplane. Everything he was showing can be self-hosted. So we have several customers in both the federal space or perhaps the financial space that will choose to self-host everything on the isolated network environment. We can do that. And we even have features for the offline agent installation packages, and we can host those. So you don't need external access for anything we are showing there. So, yeah, great questions. Another question from Jake: is it recommended to send all data through Bindplane? Right now, for the cloud-to-cloud connections, we either use a third-party connector or webhook through GCP. So, excellent question too. We do have a feature set that is actually growing where we can manage some of that cloud-to-cloud connection from SecOps within Bindplane. So that will be GA here soon. And those are they basically taking those SecOps feeds where you can manage them within Bindplane. What I would recommend is more of a hybrid scenario where if you want things from a more detailed perspective, install the collector on those VMs. For example, if you're hosting them on Azure or AWS, we also have a lot of large customers pulling from something like Azure Event Hub, and we can do a lot of filtering there. So you have a lot more granularity and control when that data comes in via Bindplane, and then we can help filter things there, but then kind of work in parallel with those direct feeds that you have within SecOps, where you can do some of the management with the Bindplane, some of it within the Google SecOps today. So let's see, looking back at the questions, can a Bindplane collector and a host connecting two different SIEM systems? Yep, I could show that off as well. And let's see, is there anything else as far as questions we should be able to answer? I think we have most of these covered.
Yeah, we're good for now. We're good for now. Those are great questions to get us going. But yeah, as Craig said, much of this we're going to demo, so you're gonna definitely see this live as well, and with a hands-on approach. So yeah.
Okay, with that, I'll go ahead and share my screen. It looks like that screen share is coming through. Awesome.
Yep.
So this is Bindplane. Bindplane is two things. This way I like to look at it. It is that managed OpenTelemetry collector, which when we connect to those via the OPAP protocol, and you see them here within the UI, those are called agents. So collectors, agents, gateways, those are all three the exact same thing from the actual binary perspective. It's just the role that it is having within your telemetry pipeline. So within my demo environment, I am connected to these collectors. These agents are connected back to app.bindplane.com. So the second thing that is Bindplane is the Bindplane server that you are seeing here. And in this case, I'm showing our SaaS environment, but you can also self-host it for those isolated type of network scenarios. When I go to the overview and visualize, this is where you start things. You can see things. These are the configurations. And what a configuration is, it's the definition of the source. So what you're gathering from, all the different metrics, logs, and traces. It's the processing that you are doing. And then finally, the destination. And we're actually going to build one of these together here as we go forward in the demo itself. But in my demo environment, I have some of these configurations, for example, for point of sale systems, where I have 10,000 of these OpenTelemetry collectors, 10,000 of these agents, and then those are sending data on. And then I can see some of my top destinations, for example, like SecOps, Splunk Cloud, and Google Cloud Logging. So it's a good overview and just kind of what it looks like with data flowing. Where things get more interesting is when you go to the summary view. And this is where I like to start a lot of my demos, where I can go in here, I can see the health of my environment. I have 14,000 agents that are being managed, and I have several that are disconnected. And if I want to see what that list looks like of disconnected agents, I can click on this, and I can see exactly the name of those disconnected agents as I'm going through here. So we have a lot of features like that where we have designed everything within the UI to scale from either a small installation with a handful of agents or up to where we have within the field. One company, for example, has about 90,000 that 90,000 live agents from within one Bindplane server instance. So we have UI elements that can handle those kind of scales and allow you to manage quickly. So here I can see what the health of my estate looks like overall. In the middle, this is where things get really interesting, looking at the overall consumption amounts. So I can pick a destination, for example, and I have some interesting forwarding and filtering going on to my Splunk Cloud instance. So I can see from a data summary perspective, over the last 30 days, I have 1 terabyte of data in, and I'm saving about 20% on the overall consumption being sent to my Splunk Cloud destination. That is because of the filtering that I'm doing within my pipeline. So what's great within our model, like as Adnan was showing, all of the filtering, the redaction, all of that happens at the collector level, which can either happen on the endpoint that you're collecting from, or at the gateway level, and we can keep the actual network consumption at a minimum because that is very efficient, right? To be able to do that filtering on the endpoints of where we are collecting from. Finally, at the bottom, I can see what my top 5 configurations are as far as sending data. In this case, I have this point of sale configuration, which is quite large. So this is sending 3.6 exabytes of data. So just massive from a scale perspective, and we are able to handle that here within Bindplane. So when you're getting set up with Bindplane, which by the way, I mentioned Bindplane, I would say anybody in the call who has not actually set up Bindplane directly, we have a free tier. It's easy to sign up. Just go to our website, sign up. It's easy to get started from there. And the first thing that you'll do after you log in is get an agent set up and connected here. And here I have my 14,000 systems. But the very first thing you would do is go to install agent. So these are those managed OpenTelemetry collectors. And like Adnan mentioned, we can actually handle folks bringing their own OpenTelemetry distribution. We've designed it in such a way that out of the box, it's very easy with BDOT. That's our own distribution of the OpenTelemetry collector, but you can also bring your own. And we have a lot of custom type of use cases for, especially for larger and more specialized customers, where folks would choose to do that. And then you can see a bit of a preview here with this Google built OpenTelemetry collector. So Google has this available today, but it's kind of limited for the different platforms that it supports. But we are working with Google where in Q1, we will have the ability for you to choose to use the Google built OpenTelemetry collector and be able to manage it within Bindplane itself. So again, showing off our flexibility. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that you have a lot of options as far as gathering data, but you can manage all that collection within Bindplane itself. So I'll go ahead and pick BDOT version 1, and this is what I would recommend for the production use today. I can then pick a platform. I'll go ahead and pick Linux because that's pretty common for us. We do have the ability to assign it to a fleet, which we'll get into that later, and then configuration if we want to out of the box. But for now, I'll just show a more basic use case and then hit next. So what you're given here is a single line installer. I'll go ahead and zoom in a little bit here. And what this will do is this will pull from bdot.bindplane.com, which is it's actually backed by a Google Cloud Storage bucket. It's our URL. Pull down the installation script and then install the collector itself. And then it will run the installation with 2 different arguments. So one is the WebSocket connection back to app.bindplane.com, which is what we use for our SaaS environment, and the -S for the secret key. So this with the secret key is how that collector is actually associated with a project and how that is associated within Bindplane itself. Why I'm highlighting these 2 pieces of data is that when we're talking about scale, a lot of our larger customers, and really anybody, if they wanted to do this, will use some kind of config management tooling. So Ansible, Puppet, Chef, Terraform, System Center Configuration Manager. We can support all of those scenarios. You can install the collector directly, and then there's a manager.yaml file where you can then update those 2 pieces of data, start the collector, and then it will be within Bindplane for you to manage. So we make it easy for you to just go ahead and spin these up at scale. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to switch to a different demo environment where I have some live Windows systems with load. And then I'll be able to demonstrate one more thing while I'm doing this. So within our demo environment, we have 2 different projects. You have an organization, and typically the organization is associated with your license. Usually that is one organization per customer, and then you can have multiple projects. And where we see these used successfully is like you see here, where you have different teams, perhaps like security team or Windows team. Using those different projects, you can assign users to a single project or multiple projects. So it's great for cross-team collaboration, and you can also export different configuration resources and move them between the projects. So we can support kind of different models there, again, to be able to support at scale. I do have my own live environment I'm actually going to jump over to. So by doing that, I switched organizations, and now I'm in my live lab environment. So let's go ahead and build our first configuration. And then I'll go ahead and go to configurations and then create config. And for this, I'm going to show you what is one of our most popular log type, especially for going to SecOps. So Windows events. So Windows event, SecOps. Actually, I already have one of these already set up. So They have a different name here, version 2. And then I could pick what agent type I'm setting this up for. In our case, we have version 1, and then for Windows. And what that platform is actually doing in the back end is this is changing the list of available sources. So for example, if you go Windows, it's going to have Windows events that are available as a source. If you're doing something on Kubernetes, perhaps you have things like Kubernetes node logs, and we can make that available here. So that's what that is doing. And we have a lot of kind of guardrails and guidance like that built in the product to make it easy for you. So let's go next and then add source. And these are all the sources that are available for you to collect metrics, logs, or traces from. So often these are pulled from upstream. These are oftentimes developed by the vendor directly or perhaps part of the OpenTelemetry project. But we have directly developed these as well. So we are one of the major contributors to the OpenTelemetry project in terms of both sources and other components. In this case, I'm going to go with Windows. So the two most popular sources that we see for the SecOps use case are Windows Events Trace and Windows Events. I'm going to go with Windows Events here. And now we have a few other options. So out of the box, I'm sure you all recognize the three built-in channels. So system, event, application. When you're gathering data from the endpoint, from that server, perhaps it's the laptop directly, these are great. You can just run with the defaults. But we can also support gathering remotely for things like the custom channels, and with that support things like Windows Event Forwarding, where you can aggregate all of that data on a single Windows server. We can also collect remotely over network via MSRPC, and we have some options there. But I typically recommend a direct installation approach because then you have more options as far as configurations. So in the case of Windows, you always want to select raw logs when you're sending to Google SecOps. SecOps, the model works where the parsing is done on the platform side, which is a bit different than things like Google Cloud Logging or perhaps Splunk or others, where they will accept the parsed logs. So in this model, there's a few considerations, which I'll show off here. So always check raw logs when you're sending to SecOps. Hit save, and then next. And then next, I will add a destination. And then if you're running any of the Google editions, you will see a list that looks like this. You can send to Google Cloud, so things like Google Cloud Logging, which you can also route to things like BigQuery as well. We can have Google Cloud Storage direct integrations where you can send there, and it's actually designed for you to be able to store these security logs for long-term storage. GMP, which is gathering a lot of popularity, is the new default metric destination on the Google stack, and then SecOps, and then SecOps Forwarder. So in this case, because the theme of our webinar is actually deprecation of the SecOps Forwarder, I would not recommend using this, but that is an option where perhaps you want to collect data, send it to the forwarder today, and then as you are starting to deprecate, or as you are starting to modernize those pipelines, then move over to the direct destination. So I'll show off the Google SecOps destination today. And it's pretty straightforward. And I actually have several destination configurations that are saved. So everything that I'm showing here from either the source side, the processor config, and the destination can be saved and reused in what's called a library. So you can use these components and actually move these even between different projects and to be able to use those components over and over. In this case, I'll go ahead and pick SecOps, and then I can see that this is saved within my library with that bookmark tagged. So hit save, and now we have a configuration. So the first thing you need to do is add an agent. I will go ahead and connect, I will assign the configuration to my 3 different Windows systems here, and then hit apply, and then hit start rollout. So what's happening when I roll out is it's pushing down the configuration to the collectors that are running on those 3 different Windows systems that is connected via that op-amp protocol. It pushes down the configuration and restarts that service so that as soon as that service starts, it will be collecting Windows events. If at any time you're curious what the configuration looks like, you can click on View Configuration File, and then this will be a full list of the config YAML. Typically not needed, but it's great for reference and troubleshooting purposes. So the next thing I want to do is set up a basic processor configuration. So I can see that I have 2 different processor nodes, and in this case, it actually doesn't matter which one I click on. We'll show that off in more advanced use cases later. But I'll go ahead and click on this one on the left. And what this will do, so just give it a second here, is this will make a sampling call, and I will get some live logs off of my Windows systems, and then we can see what those look like directly. Okay. Actually, one setting I'll show you. It's actually pretty nice when you're testing some things out. If you go here and then switch this to start at beginning, and this is not what I would recommend for a production system, but great for your lab environment or when you're demoing. It will actually start at the beginning of the Windows event logs. Let's go ahead and save and then hit start rollout. So in showing that, I'm actually showing how easy it is to change these settings. All right, great. So we have rollout complete. These systems are now running configuration version 2 and are successfully connected. So let's go ahead and click on the processor node. And here we go. We have a lot of Windows events. So because we are capturing these raw, you will see these in the XML format where you can see what the provider name is. I can see the time created, actual Windows event channel, which is security, for example, and so on. So getting a lot of good information. And this is that Windows event that we're collecting. Because we're sending over to SecOps, we have a recommendation here for our first processor config, and that is batching for Google SecOps. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and hit view, and then batching is a optimization for log types. So just go ahead and accept the defaults, and then that you will have the best practices for sending logs to SecOps, and then that will be available to you as this processor config. But we can go a lot further than simple batching. So this is a full list of what we have as far as processors, or we can do count telemetry, we can deduplicate, filter by severity, a lot of power here, with our capabilities. We also have the ability to parse, which especially is great for gathering from custom logs or things like syslog. And then we have the ability to transform, things like adding fields, deleting fields, and then things like batching, like we showed earlier. So for this part of the demo, just showing a basic end-to-end setup on Windows, I will use the Google SecOps standardization processor. And this is the best practice that I would recommend for every single SecOps pipeline as you're getting things set up. So let's go ahead and create a new configuration. And what this will do is this will define the log type. So from here, I can add it conditionally, or I can not specify a condition, so it will apply to everything. And then specify the log type. And this is the most critical piece. So when I click on supported log types, I get a full list of all the different log types that are available. In our case, we're going to go with Windows events. And then we'll go with WinEVT log. And this is what I would recommend for really 99% of these cases gathering from Windows. So WinEVT log, and then I will take that value and put this in here for, the log type. There are other things we can do here as well. So in this case, I like to put in the customer namespace. So I can say this is like customer namespace, A. I like to add ingestion labels, which these will be UDM fields. These will become key value pairs for things like sorting and building dashboards and alerting on within SecOps. So I like to add in context whenever possible. So things like data center, Michigan, Grand Rapids, VMware, for example, or what application it's running on, for example, IIS, or what class of data. Is it sensitive data? Perhaps we can go and talk about things like cost center. So let's go ahead and save that. And then with any of our processors, on the left-hand side, you will see what is coming in raw. So this is what is available within that telemetry pipeline. On the right-hand side is what happens after the processing. So in this case, we're adding in several attributes. So these are chronicle ingestion labels, for example, the app name. We're also adding in the ingestion label for the data center, the namespace, and what is most important is that chronicle log type that is being sent within that standardization processor. So let's go ahead and hit save. And then now I have a draft configuration to then roll out. And so I can go ahead and hit start rollout. Give this a couple seconds, and then you can see these where, for example, WinApp B is on config version 3, where we have pushed down that new configuration, and then it has reset the OpenTelemetry process. So now we have our data that is flowing over to SecOps, and things are being tagged appropriately. So I can open up things here within a pipeline and then go down to attributes, and I can see what those changes are. So a couple more things I'll mention here too around the processing. What processors are available to you is really different based on what type of license you are running. So if you are running things for either the free license, Bindplane Google Edition, either of those options, you only have the ability to parse logs. You will have the ability to do some of the transformations. So things like SecOps standardization is always available to you. And then some of our more advanced configurations for like resource detection and batching, those are going to be available. But for the full list of the processors, for that full functionality, you need to have one of the Enterprise Edition or Growth Edition. And then that's where you get that kind of savings, especially around things like filtering, deduplication, sampling, and also the advanced capability to redact sensitive data. So I'll show that off in another use case later here. All right, great. So that was the end-to-end configuration. We talked about the overview of Bindplane, the agent installation itself, and then building a configuration. This is, again, a little more of a basic configuration for our most common use case, which is gathering Windows events. So it's easy to get things set up following the basic type of guidelines here. So next, I want to talk about the actual SecOps forwarder itself. So today, let's assume that you have a forwarder. What does this kind of workflow look like if you wanted to do this type of thing with a Windows Event Forwarder? So it's a little bit different where the forwarder model, it is set up. The forwarder itself can either run on Linux or Windows, but it has to be deployed as a Docker image. The forwarder itself is not really designed to collect logs directly. It's a bit of a different model. And from a management perspective, we can see a listing of forwarders here. You would go ahead and add new forwarder and then add in the config values here, but you're not actually managing a system live. It's a different type of model than what we're doing with OpAmp and that live capability to see what the status and throughput is of our collectors. You don't really get that kind of feedback within the forwarder piece here. And then also there is the actual complexity of setting this type of pipeline up end to end with the forwarder. So for that, I'll reference the forwarder Windows event log documentation, where in this case, you have several Windows Server instances that are outlined within the diagram. You need a third-party log collection mechanism. For the case of Windows, in this case, it's NXLog. So you can use things like NXLog, FluentBit, FluentD, but then on top of that, you need to send that data to a SecOps forwarder, and then from that forwarder, send that on over to SecOps. So again, a little bit of a different model. It's a lot more moving pieces to actually get set up. And you don't have a central kind of management plane, a way to actually see that going forward. So that is one of the ways that we are different than the forwarder model, but we believe it's much simpler to set up and also understand what the health of your collection pipeline actually looks like when you're working with Bindplane itself. Okay,
So Craig,
so
I do have
yeah,
one interesting question that did pop
sure.
up. Actually, a few that popped up that have the same topic more or less. Is that how would one? You can explain how to use multiple destinations as well. So if you're not tied into just SecOps specifically, if you want to, let's say, do cold storage and GCP logs or whatever, a GCP bucket, for example. All
Mhm.
of those things are available, even in the Google licenses where you have to use only Google destinations. You can still set up multiple destinations as well.
Excellent question. So I actually have a perfect configuration for that. Go over to configurations here, where what we have, this is my multiple destination version of what we have created. So this is gathering from Windows events. And I have in my configuration where I'm sending to SecOps, I'm sending to Google Cloud Logging. So perhaps you have different type of use cases. We actually envision the OpenTelemetry collector to be, there's a nice expression our head of sales likes to use, this is the last agent you will ever need. Where for
Yeah.
any telemetry purpose, you can collect it with our OpenTelemetry collector. So in this case, we're sending up the SecOps, we're sending security logs to SecOps, the operational logging to Google Cloud Logging, and then everything to Google Cloud Storage. This is pretty common for needs where sometimes, especially in the financial space, you will have to retain every single log in its raw state for perhaps up to 7 years, depending what type of compliance regulations that the customer has, and we can support that here. So with this config, and I'll actually walk through a couple other details as well, but I actually want to make this live. So I'll go ahead and click Add Agents, and I can replace the configuration that we created in that first walkthrough with this one. So hit Apply, and then start rollout, and it's as easy as that. So one thing that's great about Bindplane is we make it easy for you to have this type of sandbox experience. go ahead and try things out, roll out different versions, roll back. We could do that within Bindplane itself. So within the config that is now live, a couple other things I'll show off here is we have this routing connector, and this is part of one of our version 2 configurations, where what I'm doing is I am looking at the attributes for log type. I could take a security Windows event from the security channel. I'm sending that to the SecOps side, and then I'm taking the application events and system events and sending those over to Google Cloud Logging. So I can send that over here. And the final thing I'll show off as well, and this is kind of nice, and this is also available to you in the Bindplane Google edition, is the ability to collect the Bindplane agent logs. There's actually a log type on the SecOps side, so if you choose to send them there, they will be parsed properly. That's great for troubleshooting, actually, getting things set up. But what I like to do is for some of these configurations where it's a little more elaborate, or perhaps I'm troubleshooting something and want to see what that looks like, I can have a Bindplane agent log source, and then I can use the UI here to sample and look at the actual collector's logs. So it's great where I can see I have a lot of info level messages. Looks like nothing's really, there are no errors. It's functioning properly, but it gives me a lot of great feedback as to what is going on directly. And I can see, for example, like where things are set up, where it is installed. Just great feedback when you're trying to understand and get things set up in that more of that QA or staging type of use case. And then what I'm doing is I'm taking all these logs and sending these to a dev null destination, meaning that it's not getting forwarded on. But again, I can see that within the UI here. So really useful. One thing I may have glossed over, when I'm clicking on the actual processor node here, and then I'm seeing the telemetry, this is the only time you will see the customer telemetry, the actual raw values within the UI itself. We are not an end destination. This is a sampling call that is made over OpAmp. And the only time you will see this data is within the actual processor view here. And then when I close the window, that data is thrown away. This is, again, a sampling call. We are not an end destination. We're not storing that data for any kind of processing there to actually show it. So we would encourage everybody use that data and then forward that on to your end destination. Great. So I'll go ahead and pause there. Any other questions before I move on with the other part of the demo?
Yeah, for a second, we can see some ones that we haven't answered just to see. So here's one that is regarding nxlog. Specifically, can we use nxlog on the endpoints as an agent and forward to Bindplane instead of reinstalling an agent? I would say that you don't need nxlog at all anymore, right? Or I'm not mistaken, right?
Correct. So you can either one, just you can get rid of your existing nxlog infrastructure and set it up to the way that I showed here. But sometimes when you are migrating, you don't want to change out everything right away. You want to be able to kind of do this within stages, which I definitely understand there. So the short answer is yes. What you could do with all of those nxlog instances, have those forward via syslog to one of our collectors running as a gateway. And that's what I would recommend there. Which is great because what you can do, and I was actually going to show this off next, is practically you can take what is where the Chronicle forwarder lives today. You can get rid of that, swap that out with one of our collectors running as a gateway, and then you can have multiple raw UDP or TCP sources and gather it from those exact same NX log agents. But then you do get the ability to look at the telemetry, do that same kind of filtering, and then forward that data on over to SecOps.
One more thing that I saw was quite an interesting question is that how would you add the host name as an ingestion label? It's probably something we can do with a processor or just the add field processor, I would think.
Correct. So yeah, let's go ahead and talk through that. So this is actually a pretty common use case that it will power silent host monitoring. So see, there's some questions around health. I'll show that off here in a second. So practically, and I can show this off in a few different configurations, but all of this data on where you are collecting it from will be always stored by default as, and this is default attribute coming in for every single OpenTelemetry system, the host.name. So the host.name by default is where that collector lives. So if you have the model where you're installing this on all of your different endpoints, on those servers, on those laptops, the host.name will be set to that. And then you can use a copy field configuration. to set this. So you copy the resource from host.name, and then you set this to an attribute here of a chronicle ingestion label of ingestion source. There's some other things you can do with ingestion source, which I'll show off here later around health monitoring. But this is how you are able to do that. And then I can see here live within my environment what that looks like. So I am copying win app A from host.name to the ingestion source. So this is the most basic configuration for getting that set up. And how we can make this easy for you, which is actually an excellent segue to this component, is the blueprint. So today, and we have a growing list, Nick's actually working on these where we're going to have probably 50 of these blueprints available to customers, within the next couple months. So we're actively growing our list here. But what a blueprint is, it's out of the box configuration. So what we're trying to do is take a lot of our lessons learned, our best practices, customer feedback, partner feedback, and put those into these blueprints. And what a blueprint is, and I'll show this, is a out of the box configuration for multiple processors. And in this case, for Windows events, we are standardizing and setting that log type to that Win EVT log. And we're doing that copy field process. We're copying the host.name, gathering the host name out of that log stream, and then sending it to that chronicle ingestion label. So it would be easier for me, I was showing off some of the manual configuration, to just add this to the library. And then this will be the Google SecOps bundle. I'll say this for Win EVT. I could just name it whatever I want and hit add. And then I could go back to my configuration, for example. And then I had the Windows events. And then instead of manually defining this standardization, for example, I could just delete this. I could go to add processor. And then I have a processor bundle. And that processor bundle that I gathered from that blueprint is available here. And then this will do those multiple processor configurations for me. So I could go ahead and hit save. So this makes things a lot easier. We can bundle up any of these processor configurations. Perhaps you have something where you're gathering things from custom event logs, custom files, things like that with your standardized patterns, and you can make those processor bundles, and we have those available here. So yeah, that's a little bit about the blueprint side. And again, we have a small list today, but we'll be expanding this quite a bit here over the next couple of weeks. Nick is actively working on that now.
Yeah, I can also say if anyone has any ideas, things they would like to see, please feel free to reach out. We are actively looking for people for new ideas and things that people are heavily using because we have some ideas, but our customers are going to know best. So we're trusting you guys too.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great. Do we have a parse timestamp processor somewhere that we can quickly show as well? So that's, I think,
Yes.
one interesting thing as
Right.
well.
Yeah, right here, actually. So parse timestamp with regex, I hit preview, and it kind of walk through what it does, which is really cool. So we are parsing with regex the timestamp. So this is out of a body, really good for syslog, where I find we use this most often. And then we are parsing timestamp, and then we're deleting the original field. So delete the original timestamp field after it has been parsed. Timestamp especially is critical in the security world where you are collecting and then using that timestamp to find those corresponding events, especially as maybe there is a security incident that spans global institutions across different time zones. So if you are setting that timestamp properly from the actual log source side, once it gets over to SecOps, it is able to sort the different events and you can see different sequences there. So yeah, I can show off some of this here. Let's go ahead and go to configurations. They have a little more of a elaborate use case. Excuse me. So this is something that when you are, oftentimes getting rid of that Chronicle Forwarder and migrating over to what you're getting set up with one of our collectors, you could set something up similar to what we have here. Well, in this case, what I'm doing is I'm gathering remotely over the network some firewall logs, so TCP logs. And then with the model that you currently have today with the Chronicle Forwarder, you have a different port for each log type. You could do something similar here. So for example, I can look at TCP or UDP raw, and I could actually add in something like TCP logs. I could set the port here. Let's go like 8081. And then by default with TCP raw, which is great, this TCP source, it will not be doing any parsing. So in this case, we'll just go ahead and leave the defaults to none. Again, make sure that you are not parsing here because we'll be doing that later at the SecOps side, and then hit save. And it's as easy as that. And now I have a new TCP log source where I can then connect this to this processor node where I can send that data over to SecOps. So in this case, I have some of this live where I'm gathering these network firewall logs. I can take a look at these. So that's what these are doing is we have several raw firewall logs. We're actually doing a bit of parsing here around syslog, and I can see that we have the actual data coming through here. And then where this gets really interesting is I'm collecting data from these firewall logs and sending this over to this SecOps destination. So actually, first what I'll do is I'll go ahead and roll out that pending configuration where I added that actual the extra TCP source. So again, this is something that you would do when you're setting up a configuration to get rid of that Chronicle forwarder. And I'll note too, within this config, I'm also capturing some logs locally. So I have some application, logs that are gathering locally here. I think that's var log messages. And then I have some Linux audit logs that we are gathering as well. So this is going a lot further than what is currently available within that Chronicle forwarder. So all this data is being collected over the network or locally. We're then routing all this data to this processor node and then ultimately onto SecOps. So this is where we can do some really interesting things. What we're doing here is, first off, we're standardizing that data with that SecOps standardization processor, and we're defining that log type. In this case, we are actually setting that conditionally, where we are setting this to Nix system. So Unix system, which is the default type for a lot of different log types that are available for SecOps. And then if we're saying if it's not JSON or not audit set that to Nix system. And then on the other side, we're audit we are setting if audit then set that here. And then we're also copying that host name to the ingestion source. And that's what we were showing earlier, host.name to that Chronicle ingestion label. So this is functionality that would be available to you today for all license levels. So Bindplane Google Edition. And next, what I'm going to show you is what is available for the Enterprise and Growth Edition customers. Go to Add Processor. And what I would like to do is first off, filter by severity. So I have some safe configurations, but I'll just show how easy it is, where I could say that the minimum of category of data that we want to send is born. So go ahead and hit save. And then now we will have that filter by severity set here. Then I can go here and also with Add Processor and then also redact sensitive data. And this is really nice, especially for those more sensitive use cases where you can redact the sensitive data at the source itself. And we're looking for several different presets here, things like address, phone number, IP version 4 address. But where I see a lot of power for customers is within the custom redaction rules, where some customers, for example, like a bank knows what the customer's account numbers look like. They could build a redaction rule for that. And this is just regex. Right, so we can go ahead and put that in here. And then we can either censor the data with asterisks or even hash that data later. So I'll go ahead and hit save. And that's it. I have a redaction rule. Hit save. There we are. And then save the configuration. And then I'm able to roll that out. So it's as easy as that to really try out filtering, try out redaction, for your customer data. And then you can send everything, for example, in this configuration, I'm sending some of this data raw to Google Cloud Logging. So we have that ability here.
Another really interesting
Great.
question is regarding concerns about parsing or modifying logs prior to hitting Google SecOps. I remember with, I think, Windows event logs, you're specifically required to send raw logs because Google SecOps can go a bit crazy otherwise.
Correct. So in that paradigm, you really need to send everything raw first coming out of the actual source itself. So that's why we're using TCP raw, UDP raw, Windows events with that raw option, because that parsing happens on the Google side. If you need, for instance, for compliance reasons to have that raw log, send everything that I would recommend collecting everything raw, which you have to do already for SecOps. Send everything over to something like a Google Cloud Storage bucket, and then you will have that available later for any type of incidents, investigation, or for compliance reasons. And then you can then filter the logs, deduplicate, sample, things like that, and then send that data over to SecOps SecOps for more of those operational type of logs. So that's typically what I see for a lot of our larger customers. All right, great. So now that we have some of these logs flowing, I could see that with that filtering, I have 105 logs for this sample and then 40 logs after processing. And you can see like these info level logs, these are grayed out because we're not sending that data. And then also I'll show you some of the redaction in process here. So for example, what we're doing is we're taking that 10.1.2.3, that IP version 4 address, and then redacting that data out here so that your sensitive data never leaves your customer's environment. And those are both part of the enterprise features. All right, great. Looks like we have 5 minutes left here. The final thing I'll show. So we're copying all of those labels over to that chronicle ingestion label of ingestion source. And this will drive what we call silent host monitoring. We have docs around this. So what you can do is when you send that data over and you're defining the ingestion source, this is a special metric that is sent to the Google Cloud Observability API. You can create a policy like this. So now I have several incidents. I'm going to click on the most recent, where I can see that over time, the actual ingestion source, so this is that host name that I'm copying, Linux app C was not sending data. And then I could see at December 4th at 7:15 p.m., that system is not available. It's because I have my demo environment turned off actually at that time. But you can set this so that it can alert you when any of your production servers are offline or not sending data. So when I go back here, what the actual policy looks like from a configuration perspective, I'll go to edit. And this is set to chronicle collector, ingestion, total ingested log count. And this is where that ingestion source attribute actually lives. So I have this set up to filter on a namespace. So that customer namespace that I'm filtering on, or that user namespace, Linux app team is what this applies to. And then I have a trigger set when the metric is absent for over 5 minutes to fire the alert. And that's how we can do silent host monitoring. So final thing I'll mention too, with the silent host monitoring, that was copying that host.name. And common question that I get is, it's great for local collection, but what about things like syslog, where perhaps I have 10, 20, 100 firewalls sending all that data on. They want to know when a firewall is not sending data. We can actually parse that out of the actual log stream and then set that firewall's host name to that chronicle ingestion source label, and then to be able to do alerts from that as well. So that is an option. All right, well, I'll go ahead and pause there. I know we only have a few minutes left. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, we take these couple minutes to go through the QAs and see if we have any more questions popping up. One thing that I see reoccurring as a question is specifically syslog. And as far as I know, for syslog specifically, it's best to use the TCP source and then pull the syslog via TCP directly. So that would, again, if we're thinking of it that way, you have 1,000 servers, you want to get syslog from all of them. You're going to install a Bindplane collector on each of them. You're going to set up the source as well, specifically the config. You're going to set up a config with the source for TCP, point it to the file where it is, and that's basically it, right?
You could do that if they have local syslog files, so we can do that with the file source. In the case of syslog, where I usually see this is from different network devices or servers forwarding over the network. And in that case, you would set up something like this, where you would have TCP as the actual source type, or UDP, depending what protocol is used, and then set up a listener port and then forward that data to that listener port. So yes, we could support it there. And then we could also support multiple syslog types as well. When you're gathering data either from a single port or multiple ports. If you are replacing your Chronicle Forwarder config, usually that is a separate port or a separate log type for each port, and we can have a similar model to that, kind of like what I did here.
That's really cool. That's really, really cool. Nice. Have some more questions flowing in. We have a couple of minutes left. I think we can stick around for a second more.
Yep. I see a question here around sizing. So Remy, you were asking about host size for syslog collector in terms of CPU disk space. We have within our docs, Nick, if you don't mind finding that for me or perhaps posting it in here. And then that will have a bit of a scale where it'll say, based on your overall consumption, either on size or things like events per second, here's what the size that is recommended for number of cores and memory for the collector.
Just dropped it in the chat. I'm finishing up any answer.
Great, thank you.
Cool.
Um,
I'll also look at some documentation we can share for setting up collectors as well. One second.
yeah, so our doc site, it's pretty great. We have a lot of excellent feedback, from our customers for this. But if you do see something or have a need that you would like documented, we're happy to expand there. And I believe we have a guide around migrating from the forwarder right here. So this is what I would recommend as an action item to out of this meeting. First off, go ahead and sign up for Bindplane and recommend everybody do that. We have Bindplane Google Edition, which is available to every single SecOps user. You can start there. Or if you want for your own lab instance, go ahead and start with free, which is more limited based on the number of collectors. So great way to try out, just learn about OpenTelemetry. So that's the first thing I would recommend. Second thing is go ahead and take a look at the document here, migrating from the deprecated Google Chronicle forwarder, and it talks about some of the strategies that we talked about here. So inventory your existing environment, deploy the Bindplane collector alongside the forwarder, migrate the regex, and then getting things set up here as far as getting things cut over and validated. Let's see, Felipe, you have an excellent question here around collecting, and are we collecting locally? Especially for things like any kind of Active Directory domain controller. So in the case of a domain controller for say a highly secured instance, what you can do is set up an agent directly on it if you want to, and then from there, then that will send the data to. And we didn't get into this as much, but there's a concept of a gateway, and then that gateway can be the intermediary step. So actually, I'll move over to my other demo environment here, where from the gateway, see if I have this set up. Actually, one second here. So yeah, we're sending data to the gateway. The gateway is a separate collector. The gateway may live in something like a DMZ or a edge network, and then you can then forward that on to the SecOps APIs. So again, we're not exposing anything to the actual internet from your domain controller. So that is one model that I've seen. The other model is to use something like Windows Event Forwarding. Use Windows Event Forwarding from your domain controllers, forward that data onto something like your regular production network where the collector lives on a separate Windows box, gathering the data using Windows Event Forwarding, and then from there, send the data on over to the SecOps APIs. So we do have some options there, but definitely reach out to us after the call. Either myself, Nick, or any of our other customer engineers would be happy to walk through your use case and talk about architecture there.
Cool. And we are out of time. We can definitely, of course, if you have any more questions, you can always jump into our Slack community and drop them there. And yeah, we're going to do our best to try gathering all of these questions and reaching out to you for all of the things or any of the things that we ended up not answering here. Yeah, awesome work, guys, and thank you everybody who joined. Hopefully, we're gonna do one of these again very, very soon. But yeah, for now, I think everybody has deserved, and you're free to do your Christmas breaks, New Year's breaks, and yeah, have fun. Hopefully, we get some snow. Hopefully, we can do some skiing, and yeah. Oh, Slack community details. You can find them on our website. So if you just go to buyandplane.com. And at the very bottom, you'll see a Slack link to join our community. So obviously follow us on socials, jump into our Slack community, and yeah, hope to see you soon. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Nick. Yeah, Happy New Year. See you in January.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good one.